it's interesting. I think like many things in the world of marketing or sales, we like give them a name and act as though these are new things, but the reality is that community is as old as time. It is something that archaeologists study. Community has always been around, and traditionally we've thought of community as like the neighborhood we live in, but really when you boil it down, community is about the common threads that tie us together.
Hey everyone, welcome to the GTM News Show. I have Kathleen here today. Hi Kathleen.
Hey Taylor.
Thanks for joining us. Really looking forward to our conversation. The reason why I asked Kathleen to come on, she is the SVP of Marketing and Member Experience at Pavilion. Pavilion is a group I've been a part of for a little over a year now, and bringing her on to talk about community-led growth. And this is a topic that's been definitely popularized over the last couple years. And I think Pavilion has done a great job of leading as a great example of what community looks like. But also we're going to unpack it and how organizations can take this idea and ultimately use community to grow their customer base, nurture customers, and then ultimately go to market better and more efficiently. So Kathleen, I'd love for you to define for the audience, what is community-led growth in your mind?
Oh, that's a great question. And I don't know that I have a good dictionary definition, but how I think about it is it's another go-to-market motion, right? It's just like we think of inbound led growth or outbound led growth or event led growth. This is building pipeline and ultimately creating revenue from community. And there are many ways to do it, but community being at the heart of it.
Super cool. I love it. I love how you base it kind of under the go-to-market strategy, and super helpful. Curious, what's your thoughts on, why is it important right now? What are you seeing in the market? Where have you seen maybe Pavilion or other organizations leverage community-led growth, and why now?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think like many things in the world of marketing or sales, we like give them a name and act as though these are new things, but the reality is that community is as old as time. It is something that archaeologists study. Community has always been around, and traditionally we've thought of community as like the neighborhood we live in, but really when you boil it down, community is about the common threads that tie us together and that lead to us feeling a sense of trust for each other and a sense of connection and belonging. And so that construct of community is really old, but the reason that the notion of community-led growth is so kind of relevant right now is that COVID resulted in some massive changes, I think, in the way people buy. It accelerated things that were already happening. And I think 7 years ago, had you asked me how do people buy, I probably would have begun with an answer something like, well, when they have a problem or a question, they go to Google and they look for an answer. And people, still certainly use Google and other search engines, although increasingly you might say they're using, artificial intelligence solutions. But really the big shift that happened in COVID was we all were isolated. And so many of us, to preserve that feeling of connection that we might have gotten in the past from in-person meetings, from networking lunches, from conferences, from going into the office, we gravitated towards online communities, and many of them exploded in growth during that time. And Pavilion is certainly one of them. I mean, we grew considerably during COVID because people needed a place to connect with others, to feel a sense of belonging, all the things I described earlier when I talked about community, right? Common threads that tie us together, a sense of belonging, a feeling of trust, a safe space where you can communicate with people that you have things in common with. And so communities grew a lot. And as a result of that, people experienced what it meant to be a part of communities, online communities. And I believe it fundamentally changed the way people buy. And it retrained us. Instead of now going straight to Google when we have a question, many of us, and more of us all the time, are instead first turning to our communities. And communities can live in different places, right? You mentioned Pavilion, and certainly that's one that I'm really involved in as well. But there are other ways people turn to their communities. It might be their community on LinkedIn of the people that they've connected with. It could be an in-person community, a local chamber or something, or professional group that they're a member of. And by the way, I'm giving a lot of B2B examples, but certainly in our personal lives, we turn to communities as well. Our groups of Facebook friends or Instagram friends or Threads, if you're now on Threads. We have our places we go where we've chosen to connect with other people, and we ask them for advice. So instead of going to Google and saying, hey, Google, what's the best solution for conversational intelligence software? I'm going into my community, in this case, Pavilion, and I'm saying, hey, fellow CMOs of Pavilion, what conversational intelligence software solutions are you using and which ones do you really like? The difference being, with Google, you might get answers much faster, but the quality of those answers is more questionable. It's a search engine and it's an algorithm that's determining what to feed you an answer for. And look, we're all marketers. We know you can manipulate that, and it's not necessarily going to tell you the best answer first. It's going to tell you the answer that is the most search engine optimized first. So when we go into our communities, we get answers relatively quickly, not as fast as a search engine, but the quality of the answers is so much better. And so to kind of bring this all home, today, if you're a company trying to sell something to someone, if you don't have a community-led growth strategy, you may never even get at bats. Because if I'm going into my community and I'm asking, what are the top 3 solutions for X, I'm going to get a list of solutions. And now, instead of going to Google and searching organically for what the top solutions are, I'm going to Google and I'm typing in the names of those 3 companies. I am bypassing organic search altogether, and I'm doing a direct branded search. I'm going to those company websites. And at that point, it's not, do they solve the problem? It's do they have the exact features I need and which one is best and whose price fits my budget, et cetera. So if you don't have a community-led growth strategy, you're losing on business because you're not even getting the at bat in the first place. People aren't coming to your website because they aren't hearing your name in the community.
Super cool. Thanks for sharing, Kathleen. And I appreciate a couple of things that stood out to me was first, like trust, big thing that stood out, and especially in this crazy world of AI. And I think even before AI, though, we were experiencing just this inundation of information and every market being saturated, competition, so many different, every industry seems like there's more competition than ever with globalization, with digital transformation, and then also with just how many, ads are out there, right? We're just getting inundated with ads. And so I think that trust is really fascinating now that we're in the AI world where, ultimately, who knows who's creating this information that we're actually, receiving. I just heard listening to this podcast by Sam Harris the other day on AI, and he was talking about hyper personalization when it comes to AI and how in the near future, the information we're receiving online will be personalized for us through AI by who knows what's out there, right? And so I think combating that with trust and connecting with people you trust. And I think through that, I'd love to hear, like, what are maybe some key ingredients if somebody were to build a community or even just tapping into community? What are those key ingredients of trust? And yeah, how do we build that, or how do we tap into that trust?
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. Trust is at the heart of all of it. And that's why we go to our communities, because there is a halo of trust that surrounds the people that we connect with in those places. And when somebody in my community recommends a product, it's generally either because they have firsthand experience using it, or, and this is where the value of investing in brand is so important, that the company has built such a strong brand that people reference it. And a great example of this, I think a company that did this really well is Gong. If you get that question a lot about the conversational intelligence software, and I would see in Pavilion people mentioning Gong, and many of them had never been customers, but Gong just had such a strong brand that it was like the first name that was top of mind for everybody. So, trust comes from different things. It comes from, hey, I know this person has used a product. It comes from, I trust their opinion, but at the heart of it, it's based in relationships. It's based in, you getting to know other people, deciding for yourself whether you think they're credible. And sometimes that credible, that the credible nature of them comes either from you having firsthand knowledge of them as a person, or the credibility of the community transferring, flowing through that person. And so I feel like this is one of the things that you see a lot in Pavilion. Like, I don't know every Pavilion member, but I do feel like I trust the opinions of the community. And there's also like this network effect of, if I go into, for example, our CMO channel and ask a question like this, I make it 10 answers, and people might have different opinions, but it's being able to see those opinions and that debate and feeling like I'm smarter because of it that makes me trust the information I come with more, because it's been stress tested. So, that trust is so important. That's what drives buying decisions at the end of the day. If you can harness trust at scale through a community, then you're really tapping into something powerful that can drive pipeline for you.
Super cool. I love you hinted at that idea of the multitude of perspectives is also really key in that, where you're getting, like you said, you're getting smarter through it. You're getting different people's perspectives. One thought that just came to me, actually, being a Pavilion member, because I've been members of other groups, and I think with the quality in Pavilion, and I think the magic in it, in a lot of it, is that it's paid, that people actually have to pay to be a member. And so you get people that are serious, that you get people that are actually like, hey, they're investing, either their company or they personally are investing in this. Any thoughts on that for tapping into like credibility or getting folks that are credible?
Yeah, I mean, and it's right. It is a paid membership. And I think I would actually say it's less that they have to pay and more that there is some gating mechanism in general, because there are some other communities, some of which I'm a member of, that are not paid, but they're very selective in who they let in. And there's criteria, right? For example, there's a CMO group I'm a part of, and you have to have been a CMO that reports directly to the CEO in order to get into the community. So that everybody else in there has been in that role, and that there was some vetting they had to go through. And Pavilion also has, by the way, some qualitative requirements as well. You have to be at the executive level, et cetera. And then there's the payment on top of it. And so, yes, there's a certain threshold that you have to pass in order to get in, and a certain gating that is in place to make sure that the quality of conversation in the community is high, that you are truly surrounded by a community of your peers. I think that's the other piece, because, by contrast, there are communities I'm a part of that I won't name, but they're really large, they're really noisy, there's a lot of people at different levels. And so when you get into a situation like that, you might not trust the advice you're getting, because you don't know who it's coming from. And it's not just the size that contributes to that. It's the fact that, like, a few of the communities I'm in, they might be focused around like revenue or sales or marketing, but there's everything from like the SDR to the CRO in there. So I don't know who's answering the question. Is it the SDR or is it the CRO? How do I know I can trust that this person really understands the complexity of what I'm asking in order to give me a good answer? So I think that gating, that threshold, understanding that people have been vetted, is an important part of developing trust.
Super helpful. Thank you for clarifying. And couldn't agree more that the vetting, that makes sense, whether it's a certain criteria or whether it's financial or a combination of the two. Super interesting. I'd love to kind of talk a little bit about, in my mind, I kind of see two opportunities for organizations. Number one is to build community for themselves, right? Slack group or any sort of, Facebook group could be another one as well, right? And there's also tapping into community. Let's talk about building community first. What are some maybe tactics or best practices you've seen from the success of Pavilion and other groups you've been in when it comes to building your own community?
Yeah, I'll just take one step back before I answer that, which is
Sure.
that I in my mind, I have like this 3x3 matrix that I like mentally organize my thoughts around community-led growth within. And there are three ways to approach it. You can build your own community, you can sponsor somebody's community, or you can like organically just become a member and participate, right? Those are the three ways of getting involved in community. And then there are three types of communities. There's the communities of product, which you see a lot with software companies. They start communities of people that are product users. There are communities of practice, which is what I would categorize Pavilion as. We're go-to-market practitioners. And then there's communities of interest, which might be like, your HelloFresh. Well, that's actually a community product. That's a bad example. Fitness communities, people
Mm.
who are like, I want to learn more about workouts. That would be a community of interest. So you have those three matrices, and there's a lot of like different ways you can combine those things. But in terms of building your own community, number one, so I mention it because you have to decide what kind of community you're building. Is it a community of practice, a community of product, a community of interest? They have very different implications. Getting narrower as you go down. I would say interest would be the largest pool, then practice, and then product is a smaller subset. And understanding which type of community you should create starts with what your objective is. Are you looking to improve retention and expansion for your business? Are you looking to develop customer advocates? That would really probably be a community of product. Versus, are you looking to drive pipeline for your business and top of funnel, which might be a community of practice. And then community of interest is a much broader play. I think you see that more when you have companies that are pursuing almost like media strategies where they're trying to build vast audiences. That's where communities of interest can be really interesting. No pun intended. But in terms of, there's a million different like very tactical decisions that have to be made when you're thinking of starting your own. I think the most important thing is to understand that while you can see quick wins with community, it really is a longer term play. And so building up the business case for that long-term investment is important, because you do yourself, I think, more harm than good if you venture down the road of starting a community only to abandon it like 6 months or a year down the road. And so you need to be prepared to be in it for the long haul. You need to dedicate some resources to it, not just financial, having somebody who owns your community. A few companies ago, I was with a company called Impact, and I actually had a director of audience engagement and community who reported to me, and her job was literally to be the face of the brand in front of our community and to make sure that engagement was strong and to enforce the rules of the community and to develop programming for it. And that was an investment choice we made because we knew it was really important to have the consistency. There's also the platform you build it on. There's a lot of great debate around that. There's Slack, there's Discord, there's proprietary community platforms like Circle, there's Facebook groups, there's all kinds of different choices. And I don't know, there's no one right answer there, but the two questions I think you need to ask yourself are where does your audience already hang out? Because to the extent possible, you want to keep the community within their workflow, which is one of the reasons Pavilion is on Slack, because so many of our members spend their day in Slack already because of work. And so, we want to make it easy for them to also be in our community. But my husband has worked for a company that markets to developers, and their community was on Discord because that's where developers hang out more. So you have to figure out where your audience is and make it really easy for them to participate. And then there are some cost implications to think about as well. But I guess those are the things that I would really start with is, where are you going to build it? What type of community are you building? What are the resources you're devoting? And then finally, what are the rules of the game? Because to create a really good community, you do need to have almost like a contract with your members of these are the things you can and cannot do. So some of the big things for us in Pavilion are, it's a no spam or no pitch zone. And you need to make sure you're enforcing those kinds of rules in order to preserve the quality of the community.
Thanks so much for sharing, Kathleen. Switching gears, you mentioned the two other areas: sponsoring a community and engaging in a community or being a member. Love to hear about those.
Yeah, so building a community isn't going to be right for everyone, and not everyone has the true resources to devote to that. And by the way, you can also do all three of these things. Like sometimes companies do a combination of them, but certainly you can sponsor communities. I mean, we love our sponsors at Pavilion. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that. And that's a way to draft off of someone's already existing audience in a more formal and structured manner. So, the third option is to just join the community and participate organically, and you can get wonderful results from that. We have some members who've done that, and they've driven tremendous amount of pipeline just by being valued fellow members of the community that people trust. And so when opportunities arise, their names get mentioned. But through those, many of those same people also have become sponsors because it gives them an outlet to do things like participate more formally in some of our programming, or host events, or do webinars, or create content with us. And so it just depends on what your objectives are and how you want to put your brand in front of that community, and also how fast you want to go. Because I think you can get wonderful results. If you have $0 to spend, simply having your team participate in communities as meaningful members can really pay off. It takes a little bit longer to get there, but if you want to go faster, that's where I think sponsoring a community can really help, because it gives you immediate opportunities to make yourself very visible in front of the members of the community.
I love that. I immediately thought of like social selling when it comes to like engaging, whereas, using your team on LinkedIn or other social media platforms, similar concept with a community, right? Just engaging with folks, providing value.
Yeah.
And that can be a low-hanging fruit. Super cool. Any pitfalls have you seen that are just either one of those three lanes that you're like, common things you see folks that are that they can avoid when investing in any one of those three areas?
Yeah, 100%. I have so many things, but I guess I'll try to narrow it down. The first one is that, for example, if you choose to sponsor a community, you can't just sponsor. You're not going to get the results. You still need organic participation. It's so important, because simply cutting a check doesn't generate trust. And we started this whole thing with trust is what really gets you those opportunities and drives interest in your brand within a community. And so sponsorship is an accelerator, and it can help you get greater reach, but you still need to have members of your team participating organically as members of the community. When you match those two together, that's where the magic happens. And then similarly, or related to that, is to not approach it like you're selling. Don't send your salespeople in and just have them start pitching members of a community. Again, it's about trust. They have to earn the right to ask for business. And so the companies that do this well come in, and their team members are just all about being as helpful as possible. We have one member, I spoke to him the other day, who they started sponsoring the community a couple years ago, but they've also thrown themselves in fully to participating as members, and they generate 80% of their pipeline from the community today. And it's because I think there was one time where the head salesperson for this particular brand was the number one most active person in the Pavilion Slack. And that was because he was constantly just helping people and answering questions and offering advice. That's what works, not like, hey, everyone, who wants a demo of my product? And what happens today is when somebody asks who is the best X, and it happens to relate to what this company does, this company's name comes up every single time. And that's how they get business. So that's a big mistake. And then I think, moving back to like the build your community option, I think one of the biggest mistakes is what I alluded to earlier, which is, well, there's two. One is having a short-term focus and not giving it enough time to work. And two is not putting enough resources behind it and really taking it seriously.
Super cool. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I think that's a good marketing philosophy, or go-to-market philosophy in general, is if you're just going to throw money at it, you're probably not going to get as far, versus thinking about how do you build trust, how do you provide value, how do you create that connection, create that reciprocity, that rapport with folks. And I love that when it comes to the community. It's pretty powerful testimonial for getting 80% of the revenue from the engagement, and that's just from the sponsorship and engage site. Pretty amazing.
It's amazing. Yeah, they're killing it. They've figured out the magical combination.
Yeah, that's super cool. Well, we're about up on time here. I'd love to hear, how can folks connect with you online? And
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn. I would love to connect with anybody, or I'm happy to answer any questions. So certainly mention that you heard me on the GTM News podcast, and I'd love to add you to my network. And if you want to learn more about Pavilion, you can go to joinpavilion.com. There's plenty of information on the site, but also if you have questions, just reach out. I'm happy to answer them.
Super cool. Thanks, Kathleen, for coming on the show. Thanks, everyone, for listening, and see you next week.
Thanks, Taylor.